It's an honor for me to introduce a collaborator of mine, one of my longest collaborators for the past 25 years, to do this first conversations with us. Francesca Zambello is the general and artistic director of the Glimmerglass Festival. She is artistic director of the Washington National Opera. She's one of the greatest stage directors in the world. She's directed many times at the Met, at Covent Garden, Paris Opera, Vienna Staatsoper, I believe, the Bolshoi. I can't really think of anywhere that Francesca hasn't directed opera, from Monteverdi to Wagner's Ring, and many contemporary operas. She's very dedicated to the living art form of new opera. And that was how we met originally, when Francesca directed my first opera, Emmeline, back in 1996. But with and the last opera, in fact, that Tulsa audiences saw live before our baseball Rigoletto was Francesca's Madame Butterfly, which we did last winter. So I'd like to invite Francesca to join the Zoom, and so we can have some conversation. Hi, thank you.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Tobias. Thank you.
So I wanted to give our friends a little bit of background about our history of collaboration, which continues today. It metamorphoses over the years. Started out as when you directed Emmeline in 1996 at the Santa Fe Opera, and that was the beginning of our collaboration. And here we are in Santa Fe in 1996, discussing something. This wasn't posed. We were actually discussing something about this opera that wasn't working, and you explained to me that it had to be fixed. And then, but I didn't really understand how to fix it. It was somehow got it across to me after talking in a practice room at a piano for hours, that I finally understood what needed to be done. This was the red scissors. It was, I realized that I needed to cut. No one had ever asked me to cut anything before. It was my first opera. I'd only written symphonies and concerti and string quartets, and conductors don't ask composers to cut those. But my first director said, well, you need to cut this scene because it's not working. And this was the pivotal plot moment in Emmeline, when Aunt Hannah informed Emmeline and her husband that they have been married. They've been married a year, but they actually are mother and son, and had no idea that they'd married each other. And I cut 35 bars from this scene, and you showed it to me in rehearsal, and it just played, and it was magic. And that's how I learned that less is more, and cutting just tightens things if it's the right cut. So I thought I would share this 3-minute moment from the world premiere of Emmeline in 1996 from the Santa Fe Opera for our guests. Patricia Rissette, Kurt Peters, and boy, Emmeline is your mother.
Is it true? Is it true what she says? Is it? I don't know. Is it? Is it true? Is it really true? Is it really true? Is it true? It can't be true. If it is, I don't want to hear it. It can't be true. Never like tell me the truth. Why can't you tell me the truth? Don't leave me, don't leave me. Please don't leave me alone. I don't want to hear it. Won't use his life if you're gone. I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive. You lied to me. You lied. I trusted you.
So we're back. Remember that? The good old days?
Wow, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
And amazing career that Patricia Rissette, that kind of launched her career. And it was great.
You went on
It was
to collaborate with, did many things with her after that, didn't you?
yeah. So she wonderful artist, and it was a wonderful opera, great experience at Santa Fe, and that's a powerful scene. I forgot how powerful it is.
Yeah, it's kind of shook me up a little bit. I haven't seen it in a while. But after that, it went so well that we went on to other collaborations, and we did Thérèse Raquin in Dallas in 2001. And then we did An American Tragedy at the Metropolitan Opera in 2005, where James Conlon conducted the world premiere. I forgot how to, I forgot how to go out of full screen. And we did some research. You may remember we went on a research trip to research the true story that An American Tragedy was based on, to the lake where Grace Brown actually died, drowned, Big Moose Lake in the Adirondack Mountains. We went out on a boat and to the very spot where Grace Brown drowned, and you wanted to rehearse the drowning, I think, with a composer.
That looks great.
Yeah, I don't think we went through the entire thing, but yeah, it was quite a memorable day, and this was the drowning at the Met in your production of An American Tragedy, and that's Patricia Rissette as Roberta, who was just drowned but is now come back to life, and Nathan Gunn was in this opera with Pat Rosette, and we after we
Hi,
did
D. Wilson. We're you might there we go.
You remember that? You remember doing American Tragedy at the Met?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think for everyone watching, if you've never read the book, of course, it's worth definitely going back and reading Dreiser's great novel, or of course the film, A Place in the Sun. And it was I think a very successful opera because it brought together so many different stories, and that's the thing that I always loved about that piece was the complexity of the work, because it told not only amazing personal stories, but its comments on class and society that were so inherent in Dreiser's work, I thought came out really beautifully in the opera. And of course, we had a great cast with not only Nathan and Patricia, but Bill Burden and Susan Graham, and I'm thinking Dolores Zajic as playing Nathan's mother, and Jennifer Larmore. It was really a sort of great American artists assembly of people, and I think, you know, it's interesting. I think that, you know, in 2005, I feel like the Met was just really warming up to more contemporary works. And really, that was sort of, I know there were several others around that time, but I think really in the last decade, they produced a lot more contemporary works. And I think that not only the Met, but so many other companies, once we got into the 21st century, so many other companies were producing contemporary works and making it really part of their repertory planning.
Actually, An American Tragedy is the last opera that had its world premiere at the Metropolitan Opera.
Really? Because when I'm thinking of what about, I see Marnie and The Tempest and all those things premiered first at E&O.
Once Peter Gelb came in, he understood the value of workshopping operas, so he liked to workshop them out of town. And by the time they get to the Met, they've been ironed out, or that's the hope. But we did ours basically cold, so yes. that led to 9 years later. You and your wife, Faith Gay. I forgot the collaboration at your wedding in 2012, where you asked me to music direct it. That was a beautiful wedding in Cooperstown. But after that, you commissioned a new version of An American Tragedy, because the first version was flawed. I felt, Gene Shear, my librettist, we all felt that we wanted to do something to make it better. We never had a workshop. So actually, we made it better for the Glimmerglass Festival. And that was an amazing production that Peter Cazares directed, I think. And we had,
There's a picture of it. Yeah, I think that people, audiences, and the general public, people don't realize how difficult it is to with a new opera. You know, when in the theater, people have weeks of previews, but in an opera, often, you know, the first time around is not the best time around. Pieces need to be worked on again and rethought and take into account, you know, what works and what doesn't work. And so I was thrilled that we produced it at Glimmerglass in a revised version, which was smaller. And also, of course, it was great. We're located in Cooperstown, New York, which is very near the Adirondacks. So there was a real connection to a regional part of the story here. And we had a very fine young cast who did a beautiful job of the piece. And so I hope that the piece will have more lives. I know you're publishing it in a reduced version, and I hope that the piece has more lives, because it's an important work. and a work that I really care about, and it's full of very beautiful music.
Well, you made it better by giving us that opportunity to correct it and bring out the big red scissors. We cut a big
I know
amount.
my staff love those red scissors. I use those red scissors all the time in things like budget meetings and meetings with composers, because I think one of the hardest things is making people realize that you don't have to explain everything. Music tells so many stories often that I find people overcompose and overwrite all the time.
I bring my own red scissors to meetings with you because I like doing cutting. You may recall that I cut a big chunk out of the Met version, and you wanted me to restore it.
Yeah, I think I missed it. Again, it's it's not just like cutting, but I think that for people to understand you really need to understand characters. And if music feels like it comes truly from the character and is that character, then generally it has a right to be where it is. But when things get bogged down and you feel like a character is just driving narrative rather than living in the moment or living in the character, that's where often I find new works bottom out. I don't need to hear "I'm going to the door." Okay, just give me a note and go to the door. Show it, or let's hear it. And that's where I think listen, there's so many great American composers since World War II, but not to single anybody out. That's why it's easy to go to Verdi and say, okay, you hear the sound of the thunder of the storm in Rigoletto, and you immediately know when I think it's the flute and the piccolo play that brink, brink, that is lightning in the sky and that a storm is coming. And, nobody needs to say, oh, a storm is coming, a storm approaches, and I think that's where you really have to, as a director, work with composers and help them to, bring out the voice of character and of orchestra, so that you're not lingering eternally on too much text.
But you believe in workshops. I think they're
absolutely. I think one of the things that in Washington, we have a program called the American Opera Initiative, and where we produce every year a 1-hour opera and then 3 20-minute operas to give emerging composers and librettists real opportunities. And we've been doing this for 8 years now. So we've got quite a collection of works, and we always workshop those pieces. And it's really been incredibly fulfilling and exciting. And I have to say, a lot of people have gotten their launches, new works that have been happened there, Missy Mazzoli and Kamala Zankaram and a whole lot of composers who've gone on now and been commissioned to write big things. And the workshop process is really a big part of that. And last year at Glimmerglass, we premiered the opera Blue, a new work by Tazewell Thompson and Janine Tesori. And we went through a number of workshops with that piece before it premiered here. And I think they were invaluable, and the work had a big success. And until COVID was ready to go to about 8 other theaters, and then boom. So it's just waiting to go.
We were looking at it ourselves. It's American Tragedy. The definitive version came at Glimmerglass. We had done one version at a college at Santa Monica in 2009, but the Met 2005 was our $4.5 million workshop, and that's where we learned the most. It's not necessary to really have a workshop on that scale, but it was very helpful to see it 8 times in that grand opera production that you did for
well,
the Met.
It's difficult to write a work for that scale theater for anyone, because and I think audiences, in some ways, people love intimacy of smaller venues. Of course, we love the grandeur of the Met. but sometimes often pieces might feel very lost there. I mean, I'd much rather see Mozart in a smaller theater, but I'm happy to see Verdi or Wagner there. And I think with new works, it's really about finding the right scale to fill the space. And that may not mean a lot of people or a huge orchestra. It just may mean the subject matter or, how the story is told.
Mm-hmm. Well, we move on to dealing with the pandemic and the shutdown of our companies. Once we finished staying alive, we were in the midst of that in the summer when we realized we would have to cancel the fall season at Tulsa, which was Rigoletto. And we announced the cancellation of it. We were thinking, maybe we'll make a virtual film somehow, like these home videos would be staged, maybe more sophisticated. And in the end, it would have been very expensive, and it would have been, in the end, really a movie. And I wanted to find a way to get back to live opera. And we were very lucky because when we announced the cancellation of Rigoletto, the owners of the Drillers baseball team and stadium in Tulsa offered us the use of their stadium for anything we wanted to do. And so we thought, well, maybe we'll somehow find a way to stage Rigoletto there. And we started to plan that, and with social distancing, the stage got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we realized this would be a nightmare, and we didn't want to cause another spreading event. So we studied all of the safety guidelines that had been put out by AGMA and YATSE and the CDC. Where they diverged, we chose the most severe distancing. So our singers would have to be distanced 25 feet apart when singing to each other, 10 feet apart when singing side by side, and 5 feet from the audience. And the only way to do this was to marry Rigoletto somehow with the baseball diamond. And so that's how the baseball Rigoletto was born, and part of one of the long succession of different interpretations of Rigoletto. There's an Elvis Rigoletto, as you know, there's a Planet of the Apes Rigoletto, there's a Rat Pack Rigoletto, and now there was a baseball Rigoletto. And we did the baseball Rigoletto at Driller Stadium just a few weeks ago. And we had an enormous crowd. Half of them, I would say, at least 1,000 of the people that came had never seen an opera before in their lives, and they got to see everything on the Jumbotron with subtitles. And so they had an incredible experience, and they told us that, and they want to have more. In our Rigoletto, we also had Allegra De Vita, who was one of your young artists, I think 3 years in a row at Glimmerglass, and
the WNO. She then went on to be in the K Fritz Young Artist Program at WNO.
So she and Morris Robinson, with whom you go way back, I believe.
Yes, he was in many things at WNO, and I've worked with him often in San Francisco and Chicago. He's a spectacular bass. What luck to have him there as Sparco Chile.
It was fantastic.
A+ casting.
And everyone was making their company debuts except Sarah Coburn, and it was very exciting. And he was the umpire in the Mantua City Dukes, and the pitcher was the Duke, and Rigoletto, Todd Thomas was the team mascot. So he had a lion's head. I think we have a photo of that, or maybe we saw it and I missed it. But we have a clip of the trio from Rigoletto to show you in our audience. We will have a film coming out on November 12th and a preview of the film in another conversation with James Robinson, like we're doing now on November 10th.
Spicchia, ti dico! Che strano che è! Pietà non mendico del permanotte, a noi concedete! Si allunga tal notte! Ma quando intende? Sospetto che per resto fallo con vita, una vita con altra salvar! Ebbene soltanto che io soddisfuni, mi calco gli soni, mi preme zappar! Ma presto la morte si giovane sono, gente taglienti di chi nego perdono! Ebbene soltanto che io soddisfuni, mi calco gli soni, mi preme zappar!
Wow. I love it looks fantastic. I love the audio quality too. A+ audio.
Fantastic sound, and it just sounded real. So we've great audio people that you may want to talk to if you do a baseball opera in your baseball stadium, which isn't it the oldest stadium in America?
Yeah,
in
the Doubleday Field in Cooperstown. And then we also we actually have a program in Washington at the National Stadium where we always do a live opera broadcast there onto the big screen. So we may be doing it live before you know
this
it.
was live. This was the first opera performed live for a live audience since COVID shut us all down. So we're very proud of that in Tulsa.
Okay, that's great. Well,
yeah.
Bravi.
Yeah. So we hope to go back to the baseball.
What are you going to do in the spring?
I think it's a natural place to do opera. You know, the Met used to tour a Wagner in all the baseball stadiums around the United States in 1915, 1916. 30, 40,000 people would come for those things. So there's a great tradition of opera in baseball fields.
I wish we had those audiences still.
Well, you'd be surprised if you let the baseball audience know what you're doing in their that's their home, and they love going there. And going there and seeing an opera was a revelation. For me, it was one of the most exciting things that I've ever seen. But I do another opera there, or maybe one every season. To be determined what we'll do in the spring, but we're looking
when we do them at National Stadium in Washington, it's pretty great. We get usually about 15,000 people, and I know it's a very exciting feeling.
Have you done full-length operas in the stadium?
Yeah, well, we were filming it live at the Kennedy Center and transmitting it to the stadium. It's where it is free. But I do know from my own experience, of course, working at like the Bregenz Festival in Austria, which has 7,000 seats, working at the Arena Verona, which has another 5,000 or 6,000, Orange, the Corgi d'Orange, all those venues, directing in those, it is thrilling working outside when the weather is right. And having an audience that size when you're in some of these, incredible old stadiums, arenas, it's a magical experience. Magical.
Yeah, and the concession stands.
You can't beat that, right? For income for your company. Very important.
Wonderful. Listen, before we would love to hear questions from our audience before we go to that. I would like to share one more of our a little snippet of our Staying Alive series. Madison Leonard, who was in Switzerland, I was here in upstate New York, and we figured out a way to create Our Love Is Here to Stay, and we'll go out on that and then take questions and answers.
It's very clear
So with that, if anyone has a question for Francesca or Tobias, you can raise your hand. I'm going to start off with a question for Francesca from Jana O'Leary. She's wondering about staging intimacy and if you have ever worked with an intimacy director.
Yes, well, so for folks who don't know this, intimacy directors have really come on the scene as part of the staging team since the Me Too movement. And they've really been invaluable. The same way that on a staging team, we usually would have like a choreographer, for example, or a fight director if there are fights. And intimacy is, it's often very tricky with singers in the pre-COVID age to be intimate with each other. You're often asking people to be in a bed together, or to kiss, or to suggest a level of intimacy that they may not feel comfortable with. And so, yes, I have worked with an intimacy coach, and it's great because it takes the onus off of the situation in terms of what people are feeling or thinking, and it often makes it truthfully much more precise and choreographed. And also there's good discussion between everybody about what people feel comfortable with. And I found having an intimacy coach was very, very helpful. So I welcome them into the process once we can actually not have to be 12 feet apart from each other, but when we can be, close again. So I think they're a great team member.
Great.
That's a good question. Actually, I haven't gotten that one ever.
And Tobias, the next question is for you. What advice would you give singers working on your piece? And I think, Francesca, you may have some ideas to chime in here as one of his collaborators as well.
On any piece, I would say the first thing to do is to learn the notes and the rhythms. And once you know the notes and the rhythms, then you should know why the singer is singing what they're singing, and then try to inhabit the character so that you become the character. And in order to learn the notes and the rhythms, I would recommend practice. Lots of practice. If you're singing my music, it's very difficult.
I think people would be amazed to learn how often people show up for rehearsals and they don't know the music. And in opera, unlike music theater, in opera, on the first day of rehearsal, we expect the performers to have memorized the music. In music theater, you learn it, during the process of rehearsals. But I do think it's funny when you say something so obvious, Tobias, as, learn the notes and the word, just learn the music accurately. That is really difficult. People often do not learn the music accurately. And then they spend hours in a coaching room with an accompanist or a coach unlearning what they learned wrong because they didn't learn it right in the first place. And for me, I'm always, if the composer is living, then, if they may have input on how something is performed, then, let's include them and hear what they have to say. I do think it's important that an artist, when they're doing a character in a premiere, that they have their own time to let it ferment and cook and get under their skin. And so that they, as Tobias said, inhabit the character. When everything comes from, I feel like a broken record sometimes. If it comes from character, it's going to work. It's when it doesn't come from character that it doesn't work. And so when they have had a time to get it under their skin, I think it's great to then really put the composer back in the mix to, give them notes and to help move it along. And one of the most exciting things, all jokes aside about working with a living composer, is that the composer can rewrite things and can fix things for people. I see it all the time where somebody's like, you're like, would this sound better if it was like this? What do you think? That kind of dialogue is so meaningful in rehearsal, and so a wonderful step often that really brings a new work to the next level, is to have the ingredient of the live performer. The same way that all of us who are artists in this medium, we're missing our most important ingredient, which is the live audience. And not having that dialogue and that energy and that synergy, it's very hard. It's very, very hard.
Great. Julian has a question.
Hey there. I was wondering if both of you found it, or both of your perspectives on this, is it difficult to be creatively and artistically productive in these, let's just say tumultuous times? Because I'm used to reading and watching, dystopian and dramatic art in calm times. What does it mean to make art in dystopian times?
Well, a lot of great art has come out of dystopian times. I mean, a lot. So we may not feel that right now. I mean, just look at the music of Shostakovich, or look at Victor Hugo. I mean, look at Beaumarchais. Look at Verdi, writing under incredible political pressure. Okay, is that your cat or a dog? I can't. So I think we're all trying to create different kinds of things. I think we're all grappling with the medium of the internet, and that in a way is the new, different, and strange thing that we're all trying to find a way to make it feel like it has the same impact that live performing does. And right now, I don't think we've conquered that.
I feel we need to get back to live performing. I'm very, very, very anxious to get back and to find ways, because there's streaming. I find streaming fatigue. No matter how inventive we get with the internet, that it becomes having all this product that's two-dimensional. I mean, I'm very interested to know more about your experiments with virtual reality, because maybe that is a window into, I've always thought that was the window into some new kind of art form, but it's still, I'd like to know about that, but because
we're starting to work on it in Washington. It's very expensive for audiences, because you have to have Google glasses or Oculus, the Oculus glasses.
Yeah.
And unless you have a teenage boy who has one, most people don't have them. And so we are figuring out in Washington how to film it in VR, which I think we're going to figure that out. But it's also the sound in VR is incredible. It does feel like when you and many people don't get to experience this, when you are inside of an orchestra rehearsal and you're in the middle of the orchestra, basically, the sound is amazing. Same thing, often when people come to visit a rehearsal room, even if they're singing with piano, the feeling of hearing a voice very close, it's often, it's extremely visceral. And so having those feelings are what VR, I think, can capture. It is very expensive, and we are working with how to make it more affordable, not just to film it, but actually how to then send out the content. Because right now we're all sending out content, on the internet. It's all accessible, or streaming it, and there is fatigue, and also, with all due respect, I don't want to see somebody's living room. We miss even just hearing that Rigoletto, hearing the live orchestra with voices, and I know it was a reduced orchestra. It just feels so different. So I think maybe virtual reality may be one of the ways that will give us the sensation of really live, and that's my hope.
Well, I hope that we can develop it as part of our art form when we are able, as we continue to, even when we go back to regular live performance, because it's such a to me it could open up the vista to a new art form. So
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to go back to what we had before.
You don't.
No. I don't think people are going to want to come, first of all, for some time, and with the frequency. And I think, I mean, a lot of things that we're looking at in the close range for Glimmerglass next summer are really radical rethinkings of a lot of things, of how we perform, how long it is, what is it, all of that. I also think people are going to be out of the habit. They've a lot of other things fill our lives, and whether it's, you know, books, poetry, nature, cooking, dialogue, real conversation with people that, you know, everyone's in their pods, and I'm sure many people, you know, you're having meaningful relationships with people that maybe we had been too superficial before. So yes, I think a lot of people are dying to get back to live, but like the frequency of live, I think is going to be a challenge for, I'm just speaking as a general director thinking how to sell tickets. What's going to incent
your theater? Will you do things do you think in the theater next summer?
Well, the theater, the Glimmerglass Festival, the sides of the theater open up. It's designed like a barn. It's a 900-seat theater. So that means now under current restrictions, we could seat about 100 people with social distancing. So we are looking at what we would do in there, and then also options of doing things outside, because we have a 30-acre campus, and what we would do and how we would do it. But, you know, as you know, having done the baseball, you know, inclement weather. I mean, I don't know what the weather's like when you just did it. I guess it was still warm.
Most beautiful time of year in Tulsa, which lasts for about a week.
Well, you're lucky that you programmed it then, aren't you?
Well, we did it on purpose.
I know, of course. But yeah, so we're looking at that, and you know, in Washington, it's more difficult. You know, we perform normally in 3 theaters. They're all like inside of a building. So I think we're all looking at how we're going to get people back. And there is truly the economics of it all. It's the same thing, you know, Broadway, everybody. And even if there is a vaccine, are people going to feel safe? Are people, you know, I mean, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I'm being practical right now.
We had the problem of the opera problem before COVID.
I know, now it's exacerbated.
And now we have, you know.
But that's why, you know, I mean.
But this does give us an opportunity, I think, to reinvent things,
right.
And re-examine
that's what I'm saying, is that
we didn't have before. And that's why a baseball Rigoletto could happen, because necessity is the mother of invention. And now we have necessity to invent.
I mean, they just did a version of Götterdämmerung in a garage in Detroit, and it was only like an hour long. And, you know, a lot of people might be happy to have an hour of Götterdämmerung instead of 6 hours. You know,
I wouldn't. I mean, if you didn't, it was on their car radios.
Right. So I mean, I guess I think
not really live. You don't have the same visceral connection with the singers when you have to hear them with your, you know, through your antenna
on your FM. So, I think these are all things that we are playing with. So,
but you will do live performance at Glimmerglass.
For sure. Next summer, it's our plan, and we will be announcing it within the next couple of weeks. For now, it's a secret.
All right, we'll keep that here among friends. Jessica has a question.
Yes, I was wondering, you guys have done several collaborations. Which was your favorite?
They each had special things. I mean, I'm not being diplomatic. I'm being serious. I don't know. I mean, they're like 3 different parts of your life, you know, youth, middle age, and more mature. I don't know. Tobias, over to you.
Uh, well, if when I'm asked which of my operas I love the best, I remember what my mother said when she was asked about her children. I love all my children equally.
I think it's, I also think when people say, what's your favorite opera? I always say it's the one that I'm working on right now, because that's the one you're listening to over and over and over and over. And I'm not one of those, people who like, I don't listen to opera music when I'm not working. I listen to lots of other kinds of music. And then when I'm studying something that I know I'm going to direct or produce, and then I listen to it a lot. So, but I'm definitely like, my favorite opera is the one that we're doing tonight.
Yeah, my favorite right now is the one that I wrote with Arye Stallman, my husband, who wrote his first libretto on Oliver Sacks's Awakenings, and which was to be premiered in St. Louis last June, but was postponed due to the pandemic. And it was ironic because Awakenings is about a pandemic. So a pandemic opera was canceled by a pandemic. And but that is, and the opera that I'm writing now, The Danish Girl, that's what interests me the most and occupies my thoughts. But some people say, well, Emmeline was your best opera. And then I feel like Leoncavallo, because nobody remembers anything after Pagliacci. And but that, the end of that story hasn't been written, and I've written 6 operas. That was the first. But well, our collaboration, I enjoy our collaboration in all these different ways that we've found to collaborate. Just sharing knowledge about singers and productions and what's going on in the world, and you bringing your productions to Tulsa. I find that very exciting to keep giving them life.
Well, I find it ironic and fun that we started out as, young artists, creating something in Santa Fe, and now we're both, involved in the management of opera companies. It's, we've been around a while. So, but I think, that's part of this amazing art form, is that there is so many different ways to express creativity in it, and to, find new voices and new ways of doing things and telling stories. We never tire of telling stories.
Wonderful line.
Right. Well, so I'm grateful that I was here tonight with you all, and grateful to be with you, Tobias. And I hope to see all of you, and I would love to come to Tulsa in person, which I hope will happen sometime soon.
We can work on that.
Okay, great.
You'll have to drive, because you said you won't even get on a train. So.
I'm not. No. As my parting. What? How many hours to Tulsa from Cooperstown? A lot, probably 30.
21 hours.
Okay. All right.
So
You're a fast driver. All right, we'll talk about it. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to have been your first guest.
Thanks, and thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Francesca. We really loved hearing from you. And please come back and join Jim Robinson and me for our next conversations on November 10th to talk about the film of Rigoletto, which was our live production.
That sounds exciting. All right. Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Night all. Thank you.